Welcome to This Week in Christian History, a podcast from the Center for Christian History at Mississippi College. The Center for Christian History is dedicated to expanding knowledge and understanding of Christian history. Our mission is to provide a scholarly, unbiased look at the events, figures, and movements that have shaped Christianity over the centuries. You can visit centerforchristianhistory.com for daily historical highlights. And each week on this podcast, we'll do a deep dive into key moments with Christian history's leading authorities. Our first historical highlight for the week is Theodore Beza, the man who ensured that the theological work of John Calvin would continue. Beza was an instrumental support to Calvin and was his immediate successor in the Church of Geneva, Switzerland. He died on October 13th, 1605. Our next historical highlight is the Battle of Hastings, which took place on October 14th, 1066. William the Conqueror of Normandy, France, defeated the English at this battle. The event had a political impact, but it also had a religious impact, as William was devout in his loyalty to the church and wiped out the pagan religions that were being practiced at the time. Our final historical highlight for the week and the subject of our deep dive is Ethiopian Emperor Lij Iyasu. Christianity in Ethiopia can be traced back to the Queen of Sheba's visit to King Solomon, as recorded in 1 Kings 10, and the story of the Ethiopian eunuch, as recorded in Acts 8. The ruling monarchs of Ethiopia were intimately identified with Christianity for centuries until the death of Lij Iyasu, who was also called Iyasu V. Some estimates place the date of his death in October of 1935, but the exact date is unknown. Today in our deep dive, Nick Walters, director of the Center for Christian History, talks with Wolbert Smidt of the University of Jena about Lij Iyasu.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of This Week in Christian History. And this, the week of October 13th of our episode, we are originally focusing, which makes this an interesting twist on our podcast. We were originally focused in on the death of a Coptic Ethiopian Christian king named Iyasu I, who died on October 13th in 1706. But as my learned guest has helped me figure out today, and because of my mistake of trying to be able to connect the dots, we're actually going to be able to talk about a different Ethiopian king whose name was Lij Iyasu, who is we'll get into a good bit, and so we get to talk about some of all of that. So Dr. Wolbert Smidt is with us here today. He is at the University of Jena in Germany and is an Ethiopian a scholar and an enthusiast, an anthropologist, and a myriad of other things that is joining us to be able to talk about Christianity in Ethiopia, which I think is an absolutely fascinating subject. So, Dr. Smidt, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I think our starting point is the name,
Yes.
Iyasu. I think this is quite an interesting entrance point to the entire history. What's now interesting about Ethiopian monarchs is not only that they are Christian by tradition since centuries and centuries, not only because Ethiopia has officially been Christian since the 4th century AD, which means one of the earliest Christian countries of the world. But in addition to that, the Ethiopian Christianity is not something just found, let's say, in Christian rituals, in Christian discourses, but it organizes the entire political structure. It organizes the entire, let's say, organization of public life. And this includes the naming systems used by monarchs and by the wider population. So Iyasu is a good example. It means Joshua. It refers to Joshua. And let me explain a little bit about the background, about the context of it. I think that's quite important to understand. Christian country is not the same as another Christian country. Christian country can mean everything. Ethiopia was over the centuries since late antiquity. It's very well documented. Warfaring country, a warfaring state, a monarchy with a very strong army and very strong military traditions. What is now interesting, however, that exactly these military traditions, these traditions of rulership, are strongly linked with biblical discourses. So every single political action, every single question of political organization, every single question of legitimacy of monarchs is linked with biblical discourses and or Christian discourses. So what's interesting here is when you are a king, you want to have a sort of biblical background, not because just what you are saying or what you're doing, not just because of an abstract reference system, but you yourself have to be part of the biblical narrative. So Ethiopia is fascinating from a point of view of history of Christianity, because there are very few countries which are as radical in their, let's say, self-Christianization and the identification of anything happening in the country with biblical stories.
Okay.
Since quite ancient times, it's in late antiquity thing, which we can observe in the sources. And Ethiopia is a country which is rich from a historical point of view. There are chronicles, there are hagiographies, the writings about the saints, including Ethiopian saints. There's a very rich literature, Christian literature, translated from Arabic, translated from Greek, and from even other languages. So this is a country which is whose power system, whose spiritual system, whose cultures in plural form is heavily ingrained in Christian narratives. So that's how we can easily understand that any monarch has to be part of this kind of thinking system.
Wow. It's kind of ingrained almost. It's
It's
understood that this is really what
yes,
this is our way of not only governing, but also that is so totally tied to a biblical narrative as well. And then not just biblical in an Old Testament biblical way, to think of the Queen of Sheba, for example, on kind of where that might be, but also then a New Testament way, like we learned about the Ethiopian eunuch, right? And the other stories that are there. There's a transfer into that, and they're intermelded, almost kind of like the Byzantine Empire of some sorts, right? I mean, where the king was the emperor, but he also was maybe not taking care of the day-to-day parts of the clergy, but they were so interwoven to each other that you couldn't tell where one stopped and the other one started. I mean, is that sort
yeah,
of right, or
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Let me use some of the examples, some of the
yes,
points
please.
you mentioned. You mentioned the Queen of Sheba. So I just said that Ethiopian rulership was not just referring to biblical stories, but they themselves had to ingrain their bodies, their lineages, the entire power system, their entire system of relationships into the biblical story. And one entrance point for Ethiopian rulership was precisely the biblical story of the Queen of Sheba, which is in Ethiopian language Nigiste Saba. Saba refers to the really historical kingdom of Saba, which is a South Arabian kingdom on which we are working together with colleagues from the German Archaeological Institute and others. So this is a real kingdom. And what's interesting, in antiquity, we had an important kingdom, which was an Ethiopian Sabaean kingdom in the northern highlands of Ethiopia. We have Sabaean architecture. We have kings who call themselves the kings of the local people and of the Sabaeans, which is the Sabaeans in Ethiopia. So we have a real historical tradition of a presence of this ancient population, this ancient people, which is mentioned in the Bible. And what's important about the biblical tradition is that the so-called Queen of Saba, or Queen of Sheba in English, is visiting King Solomon because of his wisdom. She wants to learn about his wisdom. She wants to learn about him. This is what the biblical story tells. The Ethiopians are always very good storytellers, and they add details which are so well constructed that they became an absolutely central part of Ethiopian identity. And what is this story? In fact, King Solomon of Israel tricked the Queen of Saba. He gave her a lot of food with a lot of salt. She got very thirsty. And before they had concluded a sort of contract, in fact, it's a classical treaty of peace. It's a peace treaty. I will not take anything belonging to you, and you will not take anything from me. That's a peace treaty.
Sure.
But how did he apply it? In fact, he gave her only food and nothing to drink, and it was absolutely salty. So in the night she woke up and could not bear the thirst. So she went to the palace area where there were the wells used by Solomon. So she was drinking. Solomon said, "Oh, I caught you. You are taking something which belongs to me. I will now take something which belongs to you." And he slept with her.
That's a much better story than we get in Kings and
So
Chronicles.
that's a very Ethiopian story. So what happened? She went back, and according to the Ethiopian narrative, she went back to Ethiopia. And there's something interesting in the historical record. In fact, in southern Arabia, we do not have queens. We have only kings. But we do have, we know it from inscriptions, very powerful women who were ruling the country, it seems, in a symbolic or very concrete way, together with kings. So we do have female figures in the rulership of the country in the antiquity, in the time of the kingdom of Saba, in the time of the Sabaeans of Ethiopia. So according to the Ethiopian narrative, this queen went back to Ethiopia. She gave birth to a king, and this king became the founder of the dynasty. And if we look further into this genealogy, it also means that Jesus himself is a relative. Yeah, so it's very clear Jesus comes from the house of David. And precisely this is also the case for the Ethiopian kings. So this is why when Ethiopian rulers name themselves after biblical figures, it's not like in the European system where we simply take, let's say, beautiful names or names which evoke some interesting or important ideas. So it's a sort of abstract reference system, which is nice to have, but which is not 100% part of our bodies, of our
Mhm,
lineage, of
mhm.
our daily life. In the Ethiopian definition, it's totally different. There's these 2 points. One, the descent, direct descent from King Solomon means that these kings were relatives of Jesus Christus, Jesus, which gave them a proximity to heavens, to God, to the will of God, which no other king in the world can have.
Almost like a divine right, right? I
It's
mean,
a divine right.
I got
And
in it. I got it. I
it's
was
a
born one
genealogical,
day. I was born one day of my mother, and because the lineage to the lineage to the lineage happens, I've got the credibility, if you will. If anybody challenges or wonders or I've
exactly,
got it in me, just like my great 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 did, all the way down.
absolutely. So there's an aspect of inherited divinity, a closeness to divinity, without any claim to be close to the divine in the sense of replacing the divine. This doesn't exist in Christianity, this doesn't exist in Ethiopian tradition. But this proximity still is a
Mm,
very, very crucial factor in the entire power system of Ethiopia. So this genealogical element is the one. The other element is the naming. And here we come back to Iyasu, our starting point and our
yes,
general topic.
yes.
Uh, when you name your child after a biblical figure or after a Christian idea, This again is not just a name which refers to an idea. It creates, and this is very strong element of Orthodox Christian traditions. This means evoking presence. Presence of the divine is evoked through the name. Let me take a more modern example. Many people do know about Haile Selassie, the last emperor of Ethiopia in the 20th century. Haile Selassie means the power of the Trinity. So Haile means power. Haile,
Okay.
the E is linking it. So like in English, off. Selassie means Trinity. So the king, the ruler, the King of Kings is named after Trinity, not in the sense that he refers himself to Trinity, but he refers himself to the power of the Trinity. So the Trinity is working through him. And in the Orthodox tradition, there's something extremely important with names and with iconography, with paintings. If you have a painting showing a saint, the saint is present through the painting. This is the precise meaning of icons.
Right.
Paintings are paintings. They're again nice to have. They evoke something. They let us think about, for example, the saints. But in the Orthodox Christian tradition, it's totally different. The painting itself has an effect in the sense that it creates an absolute presence of the divine or of the saint, of the saintly figure who is shown. So a picture, a painting of Selassie, of the Trinity, means the Trinity is actually with you. The same with names. So if you call your child Iyasu, you refer to Joshua, the biblical figure. And what's the meaning of referring to Joshua? Means referring to the closeness between Joshua and God. So you link again through the name, you link yourself with the divine. You have one, the divine heritage through your genealogy. And second, you have the divine proximity actively ingrained in your name.
You can watch the rest of Nick's interview with Wolbert Smidt on the Center for Christian History website at centerforchristianhistory.com. This Week in Christian History is produced for the Center for Christian History by Blue and Gold Media at Mississippi College, in cooperation with the MC Department of Communication. For episode transcripts and more information, visit centerforchristianhistory.com. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow the Center for Christian History on Facebook at the Center for Christian History, and on Instagram at Christ Hist Today. That's ChristHistToday. Our next podcast episode is coming next week. Thank you for listening.